Okay, in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the classes at university that you're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks, answer some of those frequently asked questions, and some of the things you probably haven't even thought to ask yet. Plus, we're going to talk about the mandatory attendance requirement, the fact that there is a policy at the university, and if you miss a certain number of classes, you can automatically fail. And we don't want that, so I'm going to help you navigate through that process. It's going to be super easy. Starting with the mentality that you should be taking into university when you begin. And if you get this mentality right, pretty much everything else becomes trivial. So let's start there. University should be considered a full-time job. 40 hours a week is basically the expectation we have of you. That's what you do in a full-time job. That's what you should think of your university like. And then it'll be pretty easy. So basically, the way it works is each subject you're taking is assuming you're putting in, on average, 10 hours a week. It's kind of in the course outlines, that's the expectation. And that's sort of the expectation of an average student. So somebody got an 85-ish ATAR, getting an average mark, 60, 65, something like that. Not because we ever force you into a bell curve like that, but that's just, how it sort of works out. So, that's kind of our expectation of you. And if you meet that, you should be fine. Does this mean that you can't do things like work, play sport, all of that? Of course you can. I did. I worked through the entirety of my undergrad, about 15 hours a week. I played football at a somewhat competitive level. But it's on top of, it's as well as, not instead of. It's not on the university to navigate around your other life commitments. That just can't happen, right? There's too many people, there's too many variables. So the uni fixes its requirements, and then you stack all these other bits of your life around those things. And if you have clashes as a result of that, because you will, that's just how life works. It happens. Sometimes your timetable clashes. Sometimes it's football training is on at the same time as tutorial. You work through that. You make that call. I used to bail out of one of the tutorials to go and train, and it just meant that I had to work twice as hard at that course because I was behind, because I was missing tutorial content. It was my call to play football, so it was my call to catch up on those things. Same thing with work and all that kind of stuff, right? So, it's not the end of the world. You can deal with these things. You just got to get on top of them. The other side of that, though, because, maybe you have to work more hours than I did, or maybe some other part of your life comes up, like you have a baby or get married or get divorced. I don't know what you're doing in your personal life. You don't have to take 4 subjects every single semester. It's the fastest way to get through, but it's not the only way to get through. And loads of people end up taking 3 subjects for a while, or 2 subjects, or they take 6 months off in order to deal with their life admin such that they can be successful. And that is not failing. That is finding a better optimum solution for you and what is going on in your life at the time. It's a bit of a thing that some people struggle with, but it's totally fine to optimize your university and your life, okay? The other thing is, I said the expectation is every subject says 10 hours a week that you put in and get your average mark and whatever. If you, want to excel, you're going to need to do more than that. If you struggle, if you're weaker at some of these things, you're going to need to do more of that. But also, you're probably going to just naturally be better at some things than other things, and some courses are going to be easier and harder. So you may not put your 40 hours a week in, or however many hours you decide to put in, equally across the board. Sometimes you might prioritize one course over another. I know I did. I really struggled at thermodynamics, so I had to put more time into thermodynamics than my other courses, and it took sort of the lion's share. And that's totally okay. Cool. All right, so that's sort of expectations. Another part of university that's a little bit different for some people when they're first coming in is the variation in teaching styles. There is a lot of control given to lecturers, people who run different courses. I run Eng 1500, by the way. And I teach in a very specific style based on the content I am teaching. And if I was teaching different content, I would teach it in a different style. So you're going to have different lecturers teaching you in different ways. And this is a good thing, this irregularity, because it does mean we can customize our style based on the content that we're delivering, so we do it in the absolute best way. Also, different teachers personally have different styles that they thrive at. And so do actually different students. Some students out of arts will learn in a different environment than students out of engineering, or even surveyors might learn different to electrical engineers, whatever it is. this adaptability, you will see it through your degree, and you need to adapt with it. Not all of these teaching styles are going to perfectly suit you, but these teaching styles have hopefully been optimized for the content and the course and the cohort that they're being delivered to, and you need to be able to adapt to that. I don't like learning in lectures. Figure it out. That's on you. You got to meet me in the middle. Hopefully I've done my job well and I'm making the best content for you, hopefully. But you got to meet me in the middle on that, right? And adapt into the teaching style that you're getting, even if it's not your favorite thing. It's only one course. All right, moving into attendance now. Conceptually first, and then we'll do details. Carrot, then stick. Your classes should be worth attending. Hopefully, as I said, we've made some awesome content for you that's super well suited to the cohort and the things that we want you to learn, and it should be worth going to class. That should be the most efficient way for you to learn the content. And this is something that we discovered, that there are a lot of benefits of physically attending classes when we were forced to not hold physical classes. And you guys will know this, right? You're the Zoomer generation. You felt this pain more than anybody else, having to do so much online learning and all of the things that it lacks over face-to-face learning. Your classes should be worth attending. If we are bothering to hold face-to-face classes now, it's because we think that they're worth doing. And if we don't think they're worth doing, we've put that stuff online, like this. A little bit more concrete for you though, attendance will equal marks in a lot of your classes. Sometimes directly, particularly first year, first semester. I know I have embedded assessment. You will do a thing in your workshops each week and be handed marks on the spot when you do deliver that thing. Mech 1110 does it as well. Pretty sure Maths is still running their embedded quizzes, so there is a little assessment items inside of every workshop, and so you go to class, you directly get those marks. The other way that courses do this is a little less direct, in that they're prepping you hopefully for, you know, a major assignment or an exam or something like that, and that class content is going to be related. Sometimes it's nebulously related. Sometimes it's, you know, it's a bit of a long bow. Other times it's not. I am a big fan of this as an academic, and I was a big fan of this as a student. Literally giving people exercises to do in class and then copying and pasting them into the final exam. Word for word. We wanted you to learn this. That's why it was a tutorial exercise, and that's why it's in the final exam. So sometimes that link is very, very direct. Even if it's not directly assessed, it's directly assessed. And the other thing is, it's the best place to get help. My tutors are paid to help you as much as possible in class, and they are not instructed to help you at all outside of it. So if you have a question, you need help, go to class. That's what they're there for. All right, the stick side of it. The University of Newcastle has a mandatory attendance policy. I strongly suggest you have a look at it so you know what we're talking about. There's a link to it in the thingamabob below. This is the excerpt from it that's probably most important. You must attend 80% of your classes at a 1000 level. So any course code, ENG1500, if it starts with a 1, that's a 1000 level course. It doesn't include lectures. But basically, you got to attend all but 2 of your classes, or you will get what's called a criterion fail. You automatically fail the course no matter what. No matter what grade you're getting, no matter what, you fail. You don't want to end up on that, right? So you'll be attending class no matter what. Mechanically, sort of the way that it works is there is a check-in app, an attendance app that you can get to through MyUON, and you go into there and you click on your class and it takes GPS location or something like that. I don't really know how it works, don't really care. But that's how the system works, and you'll have to do this in all of your first year subjects. So that's, you know, from the university-wide perspective. Whilst we've run this out over the last couple of years, we've adapted a few things to make parts of this attendance stuff fit our courses a little bit more usefully. So I'm going to talk to you about a few things that I do specifically in ENG 1500, and a few of your other course coordinators are probably going to do similar things in a couple of your other subjects as well. But not everybody, and so I want to be careful that I'm not putting words in anybody else's mouth here. I think you going to class is good because I think that's the best way for you to achieve the learning goals that I want you to get out of doing my course. but I want you to achieve the learning goals. The attendance is the mechanism, not the main thing. I'd rather you, well, just because you physically attend but you mentally check out, that's not particularly useful, right? So I really care more that you've met the learning goals than anything else. That's my priority, okay? And we can work systems to ensure this. One of the things is I've got some other methods that I use to record attendance. For example, I mentioned we have these embedded assessments, tasks that you do every week. If you've done said task, then that kind of proves that you attended. And so I don't need the app necessarily to tell me you did or didn't attend if I have the embedded assessment. I've also got some tutors who take a paper roll, and a paper roll I can use to supersede anything that is in the app. The reason I'm mentioning these things is this causes some people some anxiety around what if the app doesn't work and da-da-da-da-da. We have other ways. Don't worry, we got this, okay? And I've also made a little Google form so that if there is any issues with the app or you can't attend for 1 week and you want to let me know why, all that kind of stuff, super easy. Tiny little Google form, you fill it out, it gets logged, it's all good. That Google form will sit on Canvas, and I'll show you that once that site is set up. In order to help you track whether you've got your attendance down pat or not, I will make a column in Canvas. If you don't know what Canvas is, by the way, there'll be a video in the playlist that talks about it. But it's a learning management software, and you'll have a grades column in which you will have, I will personally make an attendance column. And if you have a 1 or a yes in there, it means you're all good and you don't have anything to worry about. If you've got a 0 in there, we need to have a conversation to get you back on track to be successful. Okay, something that is specific to me, in the first 2 weeks of Eng 1500, we run a bunch of physical inductions, site induction things, and we teach you some tools, and there's some OH&S briefings. You have to be in the room for the first 2 weeks. It is totally mandatory, okay? The others we have flexibility with. The first 2, critical that you are in them, all right? Workshops start in week 1. Even before the first lecture session, they start in week 1. Make sure you are there. We also, in some of these, whether you're going into physical workshops, you need personal protective equipment, things like boots and safety glasses and stuff like that. You will not be allowed in the door without them, and so you will fail your attendance. Cool. You will get loads of information on all of that. Don't stress about it. Just make sure that you can be there in those first 2 weeks. That's the key thing I want you to take away from that. And all of the other stuff, we've got systems in place. We've got that covered. All right, the last couple of slides here, I'm going to talk about a few of the different classes that you're actually going to be attending. Some of this you'll sort of know and will have figured out, but this is the type of stuff I get a lot of questions on, or I tell people that and they go, oh, I didn't know that. So hopefully we find some diamonds in the rough here. It's only going to take 5 or 10 minutes. So, lectures. One of the main attributes of learning at a university is lectures, very traditional way of teaching. It's generally an academic like myself, so I am employed full-time by the university to do some teaching and lots of research, and I am the person who runs the course, and I also deliver the lectures. This is common. This is not always how it is, but it is very commonly the setup, and it will be for many of your first year courses. Although some teams like maths actually teach their courses as teams, and they'll have several lecturers and stuff like that in them. But they generally are academics. They're people who are employed full-time to do this type of stuff. A lecture is largely or entirely one-way communication. This would be entirely one-way communication. And it tends to be a big brain dump. Often 2 hours of content that is in my head, and I'm just going to brain dump it all at you. So it's very, very much one-way communication. And it is extremely efficient. Because I know this video is going out to 500, 1,000, 2,000 people, I can afford to put some time into prepping it, and I say it once and 1,000 people receive it on the other end. That's incredibly efficient information transfer. Even if it's not the most engaging 2 hours for you to sit there and listen to it, even if you are somewhat bored by some of your lectures, which you probably won't be because first year engineering lectures are all pretty awesome. But even if you are, that doesn't mean that that knowledge transfer isn't happening, and it doesn't mean it's inefficient. It still is a very efficient mechanism. Although, in order for it to work well, again, this is something you got to meet me in the middle. Hopefully, I'm prepping content that is somewhat engaging and interesting and kind of keeps you with me. But I need you to come to me, right, for this to work. You can't just be mentally checked out and expect me to be able to fill your head with information. It's not how learning works, right? So you being engaged, you being as active as you can be in this learning process makes a huge difference to the success of yourself, really. One of the good things to do, the proven techniques to do, is a little bit of prep before your lecture. If your lecturer is giving you things like lecture notes that you can flick through, even if you don't understand them, just having 10 minutes to flick through and be like, cool, this is the type of stuff we're talking about today, drastically increases the retention rate of information. I'll actually give you a few worksheets and things to fill out. They won't take you long, they're super easy, but it's just to kind of get those juices flowing before you go into a lecture. Proven way to retain more information. I reckon I did 80% of my learning. I've been running this around in my head for the last couple of weeks about how much of my learning I did in lectures and how much I did in things like tutorials. It was pretty much all in lectures for me. But I always tried to be a very active learner. A few more details around this type of stuff. Right now, it's in a little bit of a weird spot in terms of, are lectures going to be face-to-face? Are they going to be online? And it's a little bit of everything. So most of your engineering lectures will be online. Surveying 1200 is the exception at the moment. It's a face-to-face, but 1500's online, Eng 2003 is online, Mech 1110's online. Pretty sure maths is going to all be online, that type of stuff. Not sure about physics and chemistry. So most of them will be online. They'll be, apart from surveying, they're on a variety of platforms. Some people are using Zoom, some people are using YouTube, some people are using this university's inbuilt system, which is called Panopto. So there's a whole bunch of different platforms. That's kind of a course coordinator call, so you're just going to have to adapt a little bit there. I know it's a little bit annoying, but we're doing what we can. Some of them will be pre-recorded and some will be live. So the style in 1500 is that it will be pre-recorded like this and you'll have one of these to watch. And then we actually run a live stream session. So that's the thing that's in your timetable on Thursday evening. I will go live and we'll do a recap of the pre-recorded lecture and do question and answer. So you'll have 2 lecture things. 2 hours of pre-recorded content to watch whenever you feel like watching, but generally on the weekend before the week starts. And then a 2-hour live stream. Now the live stream is somewhat optional. It's recap content. It's for question and answer and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my current setup. There are other lecturers who would just do a live lecture. They just go live and they give their lecture live, and that will happen in their time slot. So sort of depends on who you are. I run the pre-recorded and live stream. Michael Carr for Mech 1110 does that. I'm pretty sure Eng 1003 just goes live and does a live lecture. So cool. In terms of this is something, live lecturing versus face-to-face lecturing has been a huge topic of discussion over the last couple of years. Again, the Zoomer generation probably feels this more than anyone else. Benefits and costs to this. It's definitely harder to engage a cohort when you're doing online lectures. This is much harder than face-to-face. But there's also an issue of when you give people pre-recorded content and say you can watch this whenever you want, they often end up just running out of time to watch it. The thing where you give students more flexibility to watch things, they end up with less time. And you actually end up often better off to forcefully timetable in, you must do this in this session. Although you would think that would take autonomy away from students, it leads to better students watching content. Now, I haven't done that. You can watch my pre-recorded lecture whenever you want, but the advice I would give you is to put something in your own personal timetable. This is when I'm going to watch Dylan's lecture, and make sure you do that every week. Do not let it pile up on you. An upside of online lectures, though, is rewatching them's never been easier, right? Recap, revision, you can go back and watch them again and again. When it was face-to-face, it was often one and done. Now, it's there perpetually. And we can do things like throw timestamps in there and make them searchable and links to other videos and all sorts of cool stuff to help you out. So there are some pretty big positives as well. One thing that I would give you as a piece of advice here when you're coming and talking to a lecturer, try whenever you can to make sure you've watched the lecture content before you ask me a question, because if I bothered to put that in the lecture first, I'm not going to be stoked about answering it as a question. I mean, in reality, my answer is just going to be go watch the lecture. So save yourself the loop and watch the lectures before you ask questions. Cool. There is another bit of a downside that seems to be emerging around the online lectures, and it's a bit of a tendency that when you ask somebody a question about something they learn online, they go, yes, I watched that video. What was in it? Dunno, but I watched it. Something that we're trying to work on getting better, but the main way to improve this, and hey, this happens with face-to-face classes too, the main way that we think we can improve this is by linking the brain dump of material to an active learning session where you then come in and do something with that knowledge within a few days to sort of reinforce it. This is the other type of class that you're generally going to have. A tutorial is what it's commonly called, depending on the classes that you're doing. I call them workshops. I think N2003 calls them labs. Different names for essentially the same thing in your timetable. These are generally small classes, so there'll be like 20 or 30 students in these classes, and you're going to actively do some task probably based on the lecture content. And Eng 1500 is actually, these things are a little separate, but most courses they'll be kind of more related. These are generally not taught by an academic. They're often taught by casual staff, so people who are employed casually, and they're generally third or fourth year students or young PhD students or something like that. People are a lot closer to you in their learning journey. Not always, but a lot of the time they are. This is really good because they can give you that perspective. You know, they were there 2 years ago doing the same course. They can contextualize things and explain stuff in a way that might make more sense to you than it coming from me. The active learning, they are generally face-to-face, and I know that there's all the COVID questions at the moment. They are currently unresolved. Generally, they are face-to-face experiences. They're not recorded, and you're physically doing things in that class, so you have to be there. We talked about the attendance and the mandatory nature of them. As a result, there's this bit of a tendency to advise students to attend tutorials over lectures if you have a clash. And there's some logic to that. You know, you may be able to catch up on the lecture later, and you may not be able to catch up on the tutorial later. Could be valid. If you do 80% of your learning in lectures, though, maybe it's worth bailing on the tutorials. That'll be your call to make. But that's a common piece of advice that people give. This point is here somewhat in contradiction to the earlier point saying about how you have to be there and they're mandatory and things. Some courses, not mine, other courses, have deliberately moved their tutorials and workshop sessions to essentially run them as help sessions. They'll give you all the content you need. You can do all of the work for the course outside of that session, generally before that, the correct session. And if you have questions and you struggle, then you come to the session and you get help. If you don't have questions, then you may not need to come to that session. Now, I'm not saying this for my course at all, but there are some courses that run in that style. So just be aware that that exists. This was a big push when we went online, particularly. Cool. And again, like for the lectures, a little bit of prep for your tutorials generally goes a long way. Sometimes it will be required. There will be certain workshops particularly and labs that you might have to do induction quizzes and things before you're allowed to set foot in the door. So make sure you're on top of that. Other ones that are assessed, you might need to do a little bit of prep for them. Cool. And I think this is my final one to talk about, field work. And to some extent, workshops and labs, these words can be used somewhat interchangeably. You will get some experiences through your degree to do very, very practical things. Surveying 1200 has field work. We actually go out and do some real surveying and survey a landscape. Super cool. You get to do it in your first semester. In other courses, you'll go into a workshop with lathes and welders and milling machines and build something. So get you some of that really hands-on practical experience. They tend to follow the same rules as what we were talking about before, just everything turned up a notch. So they're often very strict on their timing because they require equipment that is only available in limited time. So they are, you are here or come back next year kind of scenarios. They are generally assessed and they're generally mandatory. They're key parts of the course. So if you have something like field work in your timetable, that's your number one priority, that you've got to make it to that. Cool. So that's pretty much all the content. The only thing that I'm going to give you to finish off with is a little bit of a bonus. Your first class, potentially, I'm going to run a bonus class for you all in week 0 of semester. So the week before university starts, I'm going to run a live stream. I'm going to go live on YouTube, go through a little bit of admin stuff, and mainly run it as a big question and answer session where you can ask me whatever you want, whatever's confusing you, and I'll tell you everything I can. It'll be Thursday, 5 p.m. The week before semester starts, whatever date that is. Don't worry about memorizing all of this. I'll send you all the links and all that kind of stuff. So with that, we are done.